What if I don't read the latest, greatest book? What if I miss out? What if there's a secret in that other book, that best-selling New York Times bestseller, that I miss out? So a lot of scarcity, or a lot of information, is actually driven by scarcity, the very thing that we want to not eradicate, but we want to address.
Hey guys, Ben Osterveld here from Within the Podcast. I just wanted to do a little quick intro for this episode. I actually wasn't going to air this. It was just going to be private for my coaching group. But the thing is, it was so good, I had to create a podcast. Philip McKernan, my mentor, and I were on this call together with the group, and we go one-to-one with people. We talk about the expectations you put on yourself, marriage, the pressure of parenting, business. It's a live coaching session that rarely you get to have a insight and a look into what really goes on in my world, and have a chance to see Philip work his magic, his gift, and just be able to see the hearts of human beings. It's pretty cool. Anyways, guys, take a look, share the episode, send a message out to me if you love it. It's good to know, and talk to you soon. Cheers. The one thing that we really stress in the academy and working with the agents is, as you know, is what's the point of being really successful and rich, or do lots of sales or build a business that then you're lonely, you're upset, you're unhappy at home. So it's really about building a life. And that's something that obviously you have big time taught me. And I think I just wanted to have a conversation around this and let people have a conversation with you and hear what you have to say about building a life versus, building a business in a sense. So I think right out of the gate, I'd love to just start by just asking you, how do you build a life that you love to live?
Well, it's a big question. I think first and foremost, you got to look at the parts that don't work right now. I think too many of us are focused on the future, on how to build a life, a business, a family, being a better parent, et cetera, et cetera. And they're looking at, some distant future visioning, which I think is important to some extent, but it's not as important as about looking at our current reality and getting a better sense of what is working today and what is not working today, because a lot of us don't actually do that. And therefore, it's a little bit of hope that if you do X, Y, and Z, everything's going to work out, because we have patterns. For me, Ben, I can just share one analogy that I use is that, I've had some decent successes. I've had some miserable failures, but when I had my successes, I get to the top of that mountain, which is an analogy you've heard many times before. And I'd never had the associated feeling that I thought I would have when I did that. In other words, I looked around the mountain, the top of the mountain being a metaphor for a business success or a life success. I looked around and said, holy shit, I thought I'd feel better. I thought I'd have peace of mind. I thought I'd have a genuine sense of success within myself, not societal. And then I'd look around and go, oh, the problem is I climbed the wrong mountain. So I'd look across the horizon, pick another goal, another dream, another business. And I think, oh, when I climbed that mountain, that's the problem. I just picked the wrong mountain. But what was happening was there was a pattern going on. And the pattern was I was doing things that were outside of myself, looking for success and internal validation, which was never going to come. And I never stopped until one day I stopped and said, what am I not seeing here? What is missing? And that's when I started to look a little bit more internally within myself. And that's when things started to shift for me.
So guys, as we kind of go through this call, I want you guys to kind of get ready, because I wanted to throw some questions at Philip directly for you. I think we can talk about things. We can talk around things. I think there'd be some really great conversations. But at the end of the day, guys, this is time that you have right now to ask questions. I know a lot of you guys have heard Philip's podcast and different things. I just say, don't miss your chance to ask a question, and let's like get stuck in and turn it into more of some application and context versus just talking about it.
Yeah.
I think that. So right now, let's just shoot right now. Does anyone right now sit there and have a question that's sitting on their head right now? You don't have to, because I got lots of questions for Philip. We can generate conversation, but I just want to make sure you guys get a massive amount of value as much as we can. Okay.
So who's the gentleman in the middle there? Sorry, I don't know everyone's name. Jim, looks like you've got a question.
Yeah, I just don't want to waste the time, I guess. It was more like,
hang on a second. With respect, Jim, I'm not here to have a go at you. There's no such thing as wasting time. And it could be the simplest question. And with respect, and I'm going to say something that may offend some of you, is if you don't ask a question, it's kind of selfish, because the question you have is probably a question that somebody else is holding, or the question you have is a question that somebody else is not thinking about. So when you choose not to ask a question, you're actually depriving everybody of an opportunity to learn something. And not because I know it all, because I don't. You're going to see me today. You're going to see me maybe share something that's useful. I maybe share something that's a complete fucking waste of time, but I'm here to serve you. And so let's ask the questions. I don't care how stupid or silly they sound, please.
Yeah, thanks, Phil.
All right, I'll go for it. So the question is, can you tell me and tell us a little bit about how you even got into where you are now? Like, you talked about some successes and then some failures. Like, what was sort of that journey like at the very beginning, where you were envisioning like where you are now, or you envisioned something completely different up a different mountain? Like, can you elaborate more a little bit about how you even got to where you are today?
Yeah, I never dreamed I'd be doing what I'm doing today. I never. And I'm going to share some of the high cliff notes, not to impress you, but to impress upon you that I think goal setting can be important. But I think sometimes if we're setting goals with the greatest intention in the world, the goals are set to the best extent that we can imagine or dream or believe. And sometimes we actually limit ourselves by goal setting. We actually limit or narrow the possibilities for our lives. So let's just say, and I'm going to give you a crude example, and it's not meant to be sexist or otherwise, but let's just say you're going out and you're going out one night, and you say to yourself, "Oh my God, no, I know the perfect." And I've literally worked with clients who have done this because they thought that this was very valuable. I'm going to visualize the perfect girl, the perfect man that I'm going to basically find in the bar that night. And you're too busy looking at the door, waiting for that person to walk in, and yet the person serving you the drink could be the love of your life. The person sitting next to you that you're ignoring because she doesn't have blonde hair, or he doesn't have glasses, or whatever the picture you've created. So I think sometimes when we create a very strict, vision for ourselves, I think actually what we do is we miss the stuff on the peripheral. So one of my great loves is soccer. I love the game, football as we would call it in Europe. Out of the blue, but not out of the blue, I go to a meeting. I go to a social gathering in downtown Denver. I used to live in Canada for 9 years, live in the US now the last 3 years. I get introduced to somebody. Fast forward 2 months later, we have a coffee. And then the next minute I'm working with a major league soccer team. And this year they've taken me on again for the next season to work with the players. And that would have been something that I couldn't have imagined. Not that I didn't believe I could do it, or maybe I didn't believe I could do it, but I just didn't have it as a goal. And yet I just showed up every day as best I can. And that has presented itself. I just started work last week with one of the greatest up and coming golfers in the United States and arguably the world, and dealing with him personally on a very deep fundamental level. So I didn't have a vision for what I was doing. All I kept doing was tweaking what I was doing. And I had the courage to stop and look at what was working in my life and what wasn't working in my life. And just kept tweaking things, creating space in my life to allow things to emerge, rather than filling my time obsessively. Because when we fill our time, when we're constantly busy, I think we're actually hiding from something within our lives. We're hiding from a part of us that the world hasn't seen. And just having the courage to make a change. And a saying that I live by is, in the absence of clarity, take action. So I wake up one morning and I know I don't like living in Kitchener-Waterloo. And then I go to myself, well, where am I going to live? Well, when I figure out where I'm going to live, then I'll make a move. And I know that works to some extent, but actually sometimes you just got to say, fuck it, I just got to move, because I know I can't stand this place and it's not nurturing me. So I'm going to move. And then you say, to where? Anywhere is better than where you're living if it's not working for you. And then people go, well, what if I move to, London, Ontario, and it's not the greatest move? Well, then just move again. I think we get so tight and so attached to the things that we do, the things that we're told we are, the things that we're told we believe. And we've let go of this idea of experimentation. Somebody said to me one day, said, well, I'd love to coach people on the side. And I said, well, why don't you do it? He said, well, I don't have a qualification. Take on a client, go coach somebody, coach a kid, coach somebody, just experiment. And if it's a disaster and you're shit at it, well, then So I don't know if I'm answering your question, but there are some things that have come to me. And if you want to ask very specifics, please feel free to do so.
No, that's good. I sort of like you just took it in a instead of just telling me more about your background, you sort of took the idea of like it's not the goal. It's sort of you have to have some peripheral vision to allow things.
Yeah, I think about how often, guys, we weren't looking for a relationship, or we weren't looking. The most attractive person on earth is the person who's not trying to sell a property. The most attractive person on earth is the person who's not looking to get a date or get into bed with somebody. The most attractive person in the world is somebody that is open to meeting somebody, but doesn't need that person to validate them. And that is the most, if you can strike that balance and you get rid of that urgency and that scarcity, because that scarcity, I feel, and I say this with respect, it's in business and it's in the general population, but I see it probably show its head up a little bit more in real estate than most places in the world, and chiropractic and health professionals. This idea that there's not enough, this idea that the market could shift at any moment, this idea that where's the next sale going to come from? And while that's practical, it also is a deep internal pattern that's within you. It's nothing to do with the market. It's something that you've carried with you for a very long time. It's not market driven. It can be amplified by the market, but it's something that you struggle with personally. So do we talk about the market and try and control the market? Good luck with that. Do we try to talk about our local sales and our strategies? Yes, and Ben does that with you. But it's also important to carve out some time and say, where does scarcity play a part in my life? And where has it played a part in my life in the past? Because that's a deep pattern within your psyche, not market driven.
Philip, have you worked with anyone that you've worked through that process? And have you seen some results? And how can you talk about that?
I think what happens is, Ben, I don't know the specifics, but I'm happy to kind of get into it. I don't have like a systemized approach to different things like this. To me, it's just very organic. So I would ask people lots of questions. We track it back to their past. I'll give you one that I think kind of almost speaks to this. So I did a couples retreat about 3 years ago, and there was a couple sitting in the room, and my wife sat in. She wasn't facilitating, but she just sat in for a Q&A one day. And this couple put their hand up and they said, Philip, and they were from Toronto. And they said, Philip, what do you guys do with money? And I said, well, what do you mean? Like, how do we spend it? How do we make it? What do you do physically? Like joint bank accounts, separate bank accounts, whatever. And I'm never a big fan of just modeling. Okay. I think modeling can work to a point, but when you model bits of everybody else, you lose the essence of who you are. Like, what part of this is actually you? So I clarified and I said, you want us to give you a sense of what we do. And then you can then adapt that into your own lives. And they said, yeah, well, that's pretty much what we're asking. And I said, well, let's leave that aside for a moment. What do you guys want to do? And I looked at him and he said, I want a joint bank account. I looked at her. She says, I want separate bank accounts. And I asked her why. And she says, because I want independence. To which every woman and some men, almost every woman in the room went, yeah, go girl type of thing, one of these. And I get the intellectual part of that. And I said, right now you have separate bank accounts. She said, yes. And I said, let's talk about independence. Do you feel independent as a woman, as a human on this earth? And she said, no. I said, have you ever felt independent? She said, no. It's nothing to do with money. It's nothing to do with bank accounts. It's nothing to do with checkbooks. It's nothing to do with shareholding and 50-50. It's to do with her deep insecurity that she's never addressed, which is now being injected into the relationship. And I see that happening all the time. So for me, it's moving from a place of scarcity, moving from a place that there's not enough, moving from a place of, oh my God, the world could turn upside down at any moment. Oh my God, I don't have enough money in the bank. To beginning to unravel some of those things, which are all old, they're all in the past, and they've been with you for a very long time. And gradually what happens is you get a sense of peace. So let's just give you a practical example. You meet somebody who wants to do a listing and you've got this frenetic energy, and maybe it's only slight. You may not even identify with it. You might even say, oh no, McKernan, I'm not scarce at all. But you may be in terms of energetically. And you go to that person, you go, yeah, listen, I can do this listing for you. And I don't know the real estate world, so just bear with me. I'm not going to use the proper phrases. And you feel that they're not necessarily going to give you the listing. You say, you know what, I'm happy to give you a 1 point off my fees. I really want to get this listing. And there's just that energy. And what ends up happening in time, that shifts to, hey, I'd love to do the listing for you. But if you find another agent that you're more aligned with, that's okay. That's cool. And it's not a strategy. It's just you really are not attached. And ironically, that's when business starts to explode for you. And it's not the takeaway close. It's not a strategy. Hey, if you don't want me, that's fine. And if I keep saying that, I'm going to get more deals. You don't do it for that reason. People take some of these things that are very spiritual in energy and they turn them into practical tools. And that's where it backfires on you, and it should. So it's more of a way of being that actually there's enough in the world. There's more than enough. And I feel that in my personal life and my professional life. And that's a way of living, Ben, that many people never get to experience. And do I live like that all the time? Fuck no. But do I live like that more now than I've ever done in the past? Absolutely. And this week alone, I have more client. It is insane. I cannot keep up right now. I'm getting to a point where it's just, I can't deal with all the coaching clients that are coming. And I put my prices up significantly, and it feels like the higher the price I charge, the more people want the business. It's weird, but I feel that that frenetic energy has finally started to dissipate to a point where I'm open to the world in a way I wasn't before.
Do you feel like forward motion, like not knowing, but you just, even with your insecurities and with your scarcity, moving forward toward that, what you're talking about now, not knowing how to do it? I don't think there's a map, to be honest. How much is moving forward, simply moving forward, have something to play with getting free of that?
I'm a massive fan of moving forward as long as you're not running away. I'm a massive fan of moving forward as long as you're not running away. Most people are moving forward because they're moving away from something. Even think about parenting. Most people parent and they either relive history, they repeat history, or they spend a lot of energy trying to make sure that they don't parent like their parents parented to them. Now, we're not even conscious of this, but either of those are two extremes. They're one extreme or the other. And that neither of those are authentic. Neither of those are a real reflection of a human being. They're just driven by, that's fear, and that's anger, and that's all these negative emotions. And what lies in the middle is who you really are. And it's the same in business. So a lot of people are moving forward, Ben, but they're actually running from something. It's about moving forward, but being willing to stop every so often and really, truly reflect, and having somebody in your corner like yourself who can ask the questions, who you can share your truth with them, and that can get you to see where you truly are, and you can then pivot and move.
It's really good. It's really good. Someone else got a question in the room for Philip?
So I do again.
Jesus, Jim, once you open up, we can't stop you.
Yeah, sorry. I try not to do this, but so you mentioned like scarcity mentality. I've heard that before. What's the opposite to that? Like if it's trying to avoid always having never enough thought process, what's the other side of the coin? Is it like, what's the terminology? How do we talk about that?
It's not trying to avoid it at all. It's going straight head into the fire. It is going into the depths of why that exists. That's not just a human condition. That's something that we've adapted into our lives. We weren't born scarce. We became scarce. So I want to be very clear. Maybe we're saying the same thing, Jim. It's not about moving away from it. It's about diving into the depths, into the coals, into the fire, and understanding that and dissecting that as it relates to our relationship to it. And then trusting that when you do that, you automatically start shifting to a different place. But I'm concerned with the question in the sense that it feels like it's a very heady intellectual question. What I'm talking about is deep emotional patterns that have been going on for a very long time. If you deal with the source of the scarcity, how you come out the other end will be a place of peace of mind, a sense of knowing, and a sense of trusting. And trust is a really curious thought. When we think about trust, most of us in this world think about trust as external. Do I trust my bank manager? Do I trust Ben? Do I trust the babysitter? Do I trust my business partner? How many of us have actually ever really, truly stopped and thought about trust as it relates to ourselves? Do I actually trust my decision-making process? Do I trust who I am as a human, as a father, as a man, as a woman? Most people have never truly stopped to contemplate that. And if they have, most people, if they're honest, would probably say, holy shit, no, not really. I don't really trust myself. There's a problem. Or there's an opportunity that you can begin to address. Why not? When did you stop trusting yourself? What did you do in this world that has gotten you to a point? I mean, you could be sitting there going, no, I trust myself 100%. This is irrelevant. Hopefully Ben will ask a question in a few minutes that actually really makes a difference in my life. But if you're honest with yourself, most people don't trust themselves to the extent that they could. And I would love each and every person on the call, if that relates to you, is to actually start to deal or to examine that. Not try to fix it because there's nothing broken, but just to examine, where did that trust go?
Graham, you had a question.
Yeah, so my question is, like, every once in a while, everything's going really well. I start to believe I'm on the right path, doing all the right stuff. And then something will happen that's sort of like, I'll get into an argument with my wife or something like that. And it sort of causes me to just like stop dead in my tracks. And then it's like, okay, how do I get back on track? And then when I start getting back on track, I start questioning everything. Like, was that the right thing to begin with? And I think I start like analyzing things way too deep. I'm just wondering if you have any advice on how to like overcome that, or how to make sure that you know that you're still on that right path and to go back to where you were before.
There's no way on earth to make sure that you're on the right path. So again, with respect, the question concerns me because it's like, how do I make sure? You don't make sure, because make sure almost has this tonality of perfection. There's nobody on earth that's going to make sure that you're on the right path, including you. And if you disagree with that, we say, well, how's it working for you? Well, it's not 100% because it's not meant to. You're never meant to be on the right track all of the time. And the thing that concerns me the most about your entire question, and I really appreciate your question, is I love to examine the place where you get to a point where you think you're on the right track. Tell me about that. When you get to that point, it says, oh my God, I'm on the right track. I'm on the right track. Tell me about that. What's going on for you? How do you feel? What's going on in your life that makes you feel that? And then suddenly something comes out of the peripheral, something within you sabotages it, something else hits you. Just unpack that a little bit if you could.
Yeah, I think you definitely hit the perfectionist thing on the head, and that's something I'm working on, and not trying to do things so perfectly. But when these things happen where I feel like I am on the right track, it's just like every conversation I'm having with people just feels really good. Everything I'm doing, I don't know, it's like an internal sort of feeling where you're just like, yeah, this is the right thing.
It's almost like, well, athletes refer to as a sense of flow. Like things are just working.
Yeah, exactly.
It's smooth, and it's not this idea where doves are landing on your shoulders and people are knocking on your door and giving you deals and handing you cash. But it's not a million miles away. It just feels like when you go out into the world, the guy, making the coffee, the barista, the girl that you're dealing with in the office, the guy selling the house, whatever your role is, it just seems to be fluent. Okay.
Like everything happens easily, basically.
Great. What happens then? What happens? And I know it could be multiple things, an argument your wife, something you do wrong, but what, give me an example of how that has been disrupted, where suddenly this fluency suddenly stops and shifts.
For example, sometimes I think things are going too good and I start to question
exactly
if that's the problem.
Okay. So it feels to me, and again, we've been talking for 15 seconds, 20 seconds, 30 seconds. It feels to me like that I'll give you a quick example. I was working with a guy years ago, and we had, I think it was 3 or 4 sessions a year. I can't remember the details, but he came in one day and he just looked different. He looked actually physically younger. He looked like he had more energy. And I'm not taking credit for this. This was the environment that was creating this and the work that he was doing. And he goes, I said, how you doing? He goes, I've never been better. He said, my marriage is better. My business is doing really well. I just feel really good. And I just looked at him and I said something really obnoxious, but I said it for a reason. I looked at him and I leaned forward and I said, you know what we should do? And he goes, what? I said, why don't we just go and fuck it all up? And everyone looked at me and said, what are you talking about? And he goes, exactly. That's what's going on in my mind, and not thinking of it that way. But it's almost like, so I don't know your story. Okay. I don't know who you are. But there is something I see that is very prevalent in the human, again, condition. And that is, when we have a lot of trauma, when we have a lot of stress, when we grow up in an environment where things are uncertain, if we grew up with a father and a mother who basically had volatility when it comes to financial income, or whatever the story is, that there's a level of comfort and familiarity in that we always want to get back to. That we always at some level want to get back to that feeling because it's familiar, albeit it's ugly and it's painful and it's uncertain. So when we start to peek our heads out of it and we start to get fluency and we start to get income and we start to get things that are just flowing, we almost try to fuck it up ourselves because we want to get back to that feeling, that associated feeling. Does that make any sense to you? Is that resonating at all?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, definitely.
Good. So what I would love you to do is, rather than, my sense of you, if you don't mind me asking, rather than making an assumption, let me ask you a question. Do you beat yourself up?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay. So I'm going to ask you on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being you beat yourself up a lot. 1 is you don't beat yourself up at all. But because it's Ben and his group, I'm going to break the rules. You can go to 12 out of 10 if you want to. Where would you be in that number?
Up until recently, I was probably 10, but I think in the last little while, I've had some breakthroughs and now probably more like at a 6 or 7.
Okay. So if you say 6 or 7, I'm gonna make that an 8. Okay.
Okay.
So, and again, I could be wrong, but let's just, that's the way I work. If a guy says 6.5, I always take off the half and add 2. That's the way I work. And ironically, it's always pretty accurate.
You've changed. It used to be adding 1. You doubled it up. Jeez.
So keep, yeah, exactly. Yeah. So
It's gotten worse.
No, with men, I add 2. With women, I only add 1.
Oh, okay.
I would love you to continue to work on that. So the combination of beating yourself up and perfectionism, which by the way, are completely interlinked, no matter what you achieve in life, it's never going to be enough. So that's an additional complexity. But when I say complexity, don't read too much into this. This is not that hard. Okay. And I want to be very clear on this. Is somebody said to me recently, I want to come and work with you. And they downloaded all the stuff that's going on for them. And they said, what do you think? I said, I think you're completely effed up. I think you're going to need 2 years of serious coaching. They went, God, yeah, I was thinking that myself. And I said, no, you don't. I said, what we're talking about here is not that difficult to shift. It really is not that difficult. So I'd love you to continue to work on why you beat yourself up, where the perfectionism comes from. Forget about how do you deal with it in the present and the future. Understand where it came from. And that will solidify some of it. It will reduce some of the rest of it. But then ultimately you got to learn to live with the rest. If anyone tells you that I've written a book that you can read, or I have a 2-day workshop that will get rid of your perfectionism, they're lying to you. Except my book. My book's perfect and amazing. That's the only book that you should read. No, anybody that tells you they can get rid of that stuff, they're lying to you. So you need to learn to navigate with that. And there's a few other things coming up, but I think we've covered enough on that, if you don't mind.
No, thank you.
But I really appreciate the honesty. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Graham. That's great, man. It's great you step in like that. Anyone else have any questions or comments or smart-ass remarks are really welcome to be honest. Yeah, Koken. Oh, Josh. Okay.
No, go Koken.
No, Josh, you go.
Okay.
I'm bumping Koken.
How much of this, Philip, has to do, like, it's all, from what I can tell, like, when you're little, this stuff is ingrained in you. How much of that has to do with your chakra system as well?
I don't understand anything about chakra systems.
Okay. Fair enough.
Yeah, so I when you say chakra systems, can you just elaborate that? Because I don't
like know. I don't know a whole bunch about them. Like I know there's the 12 of them. You got your root chakra, then the other one in your stomach, and then your sacral, and it works its way up to the crown chakra. And as kids are developing, everything goes into the root chakra, and then until about age 2, and then it goes into the next one. So
yeah, and I'm not trying to be smart.
No.
I genuinely don't know anything about that area. And I really, this is not designed to diminish whatever studies, reading you've done or whatever coaching you've had or experience you've had around that is to me, I think, and again, leaving the chakra stuff aside, but I feel that there is this idea that it needs to be a little bit more complex than it needs to be. And when you talk about 12 areas, it just feels to me kind of overwhelming a little bit. Yeah.
That's why I don't know much about it myself. So that's why I'm asking.
But going back to where you started, I do believe wholeheartedly that I have a saying that the past has created the present and that the present is creating the future. Mm-hmm. And I feel that in a world where so many people are forward focused, are trying to live in the now. And quite frankly, I'm not as attached to living in the now, because if my now is not cool, I don't want to live in it. I have no fucking interest. I want to escape it. But I feel that people do not put enough emphasis on the past because we don't see the point in revisiting it. We're not in a society that honors the past. We're in a society that goes, screw the past, forget about that. Even if it's painful, let's go forward. Let's move forward. You don't have to dig up the past. I disagree wholeheartedly. I built an entire body of work, a 1-week body of work, that focuses on the past, the present, and begins to envision the future. And we have never had a human being that goes through that experience that goes, oh my God, I didn't realize the past was still playing such a role in my present and therefore my future. And most people don't want the past to define them. But when you don't address the past, it's already defining you. It is already defined who you are and who you're going to be, whether it's through money, whether it's through peace of mind, whether it's through fulfillment, love, intimacy, you name it, and it'll keep going.
How much of this stuff has to do with, like, say, intergenerational things, like through family lines and whatnot?
Yeah, I think it's really, I think some people, there's a lot of research to show that a lot of trauma is passed on through generations. So if my dad was in World War II, I'm still holding a lot of the energy that came from that. I'm not saying that's not true. I think there's some genuine research to show that. I focus more on what we truly personally experienced in our childhood, what we directly experienced. That's the thing that I believe informs us the most as it relates to dealing with my dad, my great-great-grandfather's trauma in World War II. I'm not saying that doesn't have a place in the world. I just don't necessarily address that.
Gotcha. No, fair.
And by the way, our physical bodies, if we're carrying weight, like physical weight, that's not just about nutrition and working out. That's about the emotions that
emotional weight too.
Emotional weight.
They're tied together like hand in hand.
100%. I had a girl recently who lost 15 pounds after an event, and she said, I did nothing different. I didn't eat anything differently, and I didn't work out differently. Another guy recently who lost 35 pounds, and he said, yes, I'm a little bit more active, like he's moving, but he said, other than that, he said, I haven't done a whole lot in my life. And he was holding on to so much emotion that he had never addressed in his life.
Mm-hmm. Koken, do you have a question?
Yeah. So something that I've recently discovered, actually after I got married, is that I always think about the future. Like I'm always in that planning, like always analyzing what I should be doing next. And my wife, the reason I realize this is my wife is completely different. She's always like in the present. And I'm a little bit confused about, should I try to stop thinking about the future, or is that just genuinely who I am as a person and just accept it? I'm a little bit confused because I see in my life that I've benefited a lot because I've thought about the future. But the one real thing I'm noticing is it robs some of the joy about being in the present, because I'm always thinking about what's next. I can't just be here. Like I'm always somewhere, like in my mind is somewhere else.
So where are you confused? Because you said you're confused twice, but I don't hear the confusion. It sounds to me like you're crystal clear. You don't have an answer, but you're crystal clear in terms of what you're saying.
Like maybe the question should be like, is there something I need to work on or should I just accept this as who I am and not give it a second thought?
Well, the only person that can answer that is you. Let me ask you this. Is it working for you? Because I hear you saying that it robs you, which is a very big word. Okay. It robs you of the ability to be present. But when you talk about it, I don't really feel that this is an issue for you. It feels to me like your wife lives one way wholeheartedly, which by the way is not necessarily true. And you live wholeheartedly in a different way, which is not necessarily true. So again, you're being very harsh and you made a lot of assumptions. I don't believe you live 100% in the future, nor does your wife live 100% in the present. Sure. You'll find that that's actually not accurate. But you might live 80% in the future and therefore that 20%. But what I want to know is, forget about what your wife thinks and what society thinks and the books you've read and what you believe to be true. Externally, I want to know is this working for you? I don't really care about anybody else right now.
I think I'd be fine with it if I was in my own world.
Let's move on, because you're asking to change something that you ultimately don't really want to change. But here's my prediction. This is going to come back to haunt you in a very aggressive way in the future. And you're going to hit a wall in the future. And I'm not trying to predict drama or disastrousness for you. I don't believe that. I think, and what concerns me as well, with respect, is that here's the problem. You've got all the data points in your brain to justify that thinking about the future actually is beneficial. Okay. So you've got all the data points, and what the data points are doing is they're simply informing the brain that it should continue to do what it does, because the data shows that you've been successful by imagining the future in the way that you do. But I think what's going to happen as you go through life, further into life, what's going to happen is you're going to realize that when the pursuit of money and the pursuit of business, and those things become a little bit less important, you're going to realize that you left a lot on the ice, and that you struggle. And if kids come into your life or whatever other dynamics shift for you, is that your ability to actually have one foot in the moment and being able to truly appreciate what is happening right now is going to prevent you from connecting as a human being with those around you. It's also going to show up in your marriage, okay, if it isn't already. And my prediction is probably is already, whether you're aware of it or not. is that it's going to, when you're thinking about the future, it's almost like you're putting a veil around you, a wall around you. So you don't let people fully in, because thinking about the future is not imagining the future and strategizing. Thinking about the future is actually a way to protect yourself. And it's also a lot about control. Do you control a lot in your life?
Yeah.
You don't sound very convinced.
No, I do. It is one of the biggest things that I've been working on this year, where that's like with Ben, that's one of the things that's started to change, because it was.
I don't think you were born living in the future. That's not the way you were made up.
I think it connects to even the answers you gave to some of the other questions, where it comes out of scarcity and like fear of maybe the circumstances I grew up in, and preventing that it ever happens to me in the future. So let me look into it, plan it, and
Beautiful. Thank you so much. That now we're getting into the origin of it. And it's a protective thing. Living in the future and obsessing with the future is not about living and obsessing with the future because you want to plan and have a better life. It's because you don't trust the present, which brings it back to trusting self, which is where we began almost at the beginning of the conversation, which is driven by not trusting the past. So think about it in terms, and I see this as a very common, kind of pattern, is a lot of people that I work with in the early days is they're running from what they don't want. And think about that energy. They're running from what they don't. Well, I'm never going to be poor. And here's the challenge. So they obsess about creating financial stability that they didn't have when they were a kid. And then they create a certain degree of income. Probably they even surpass what they even imagined, even though in the moment it's not enough. So think about this. If you're on the call, go back 5 years ago. If you could predict, or someone said to you, you're gonna have 100 grand in the bank, you're gonna be listing 4 properties a month, whatever the numbers are for you, you probably would have grabbed it with 2 hands and said, holy shit, are you kidding me? But now that you're doing that, it's not enough. And that's the point. So your next goal is never going to be enough, and therefore it's never going to be enough, and therefore it's never going to be enough. So it's not about the dollar figure. And a lot of the energy is running from what you don't want. I'm not going to repeat the history. But at some point on this journey, you have to stop and say, okay, I've outrun the fucking tiger. Okay, I've outrun the lion. The elephant didn't catch me. Because if you want to continue to run with that energy, good luck. Okay, because I don't align to that at all, because I did that for most of my life and it doesn't work. You eventually run out of energy, you eventually hit a wall, and you will be taken down by your knees, by the universe, by whatever you believe. But there's an opportunity to stop in life, or begin to slow down. I don't mean stop, but I mean turn off the engine like a big liner, and it might take 2 or 3 miles to actually literally stop in the water and reimagine what it is you want from this world, as opposed to what you don't want. And a lot of us, when we really are honest with ourselves, most of us are driven by what we don't want every single day. Every single day we're driven by what we don't want. And most of us don't even realize that that's the primary driver that drives a lot of our internal thing. And here's the challenge. Then we have the data points to prove that, oh my God, but that's brought me some success. It has, but it will never bring you peace of mind. It will never, ever, ever bring you peace of mind. It's not possible.
Mikhail, you just said, oh, wow. Do you want to expand on that?
Video's not working for me today for some strange reason. I think I just took my laptop on a tour and it didn't want to work anymore.
We can hear you loud and clear, and we'll just say you look exactly like Brad Pitt. We all know that. So
thanks. Well, I think what struck me about that conversation with was that we are running away always from what we don't want, and it's a real hard battle some days. And for the last year, for me, it's been a real struggle, but every one of Ben's calls has always been an amazing reboost and kept me moving. And lately I've been doing a lot of different things, and I felt my energy coming back, but I'm still have a fear of that sort of overall failure. But even though I know that I'm working towards my goal, and I just feel that as long as I stay consistent and persistent, that I'm going to get there. But there's
still there, Mikhail?
Yeah, just have to it's really hard when you feel that you're just not making it happen.
Making what happen?
The sale, the volume that you need to do to sort of regain that composure that you had maybe the year before, and make your wife happy. And I am a very positive person. I don't like to. I've done okay, but I feel that I'm not doing the right things, and so therefore, I have a real strong guilt that. And so when you said, we're kind of running from the past, and I know what I'm running from, and that is a very scary factor.
What are you running from?
I guess disappointment, self-disappointment. 15 years ago, I had a lot. I changed my life dramatically and moved to Vancouver, but I still had a moment where I had failed substantially, but I've regained and I've done really well. But so I just feel that sometimes where if I don't get like enough going in the next little while, that it's going to be a revisit, and I'm not going to be as successful as I want to be, and I know I can be.
It doesn't sound like you're very successful right now, regardless.
Maybe that's the point.
What I mean by that is, and that might sound very judgmental, but just bear with me, is that I don't think this is anything to do with volume. I don't think this is anything to do with numbers.
I'm listening.
So a couple of things you said, I'm just curious about. Number one is, in no particular order, have you forgiven yourself for the failure, whatever that failure is? I don't need the details. Have you actually truly forgiven yourself for letting yourself, your family, whoever else around you down? Yes or no?
Maybe I thought I did, but maybe I haven't.
No, you haven't. And I don't think you ever will fully. And that's the thing. So, and I appreciate your honesty there, because I tell you one thing that just is such a tragedy is when someone says to me, oh, no, I've forgiven my dad. Well, how did you do that? I wrote a letter, we burnt it, and it was this really a spiritual exercise. It was amazing. I've forgiven him for all of the 45 years of turmoil and trauma and just being an asshole or whatever it is. You don't forgive like that. What happens is it's the beginning of forgiveness. Okay, I've forgiven him 5%, 10%. It's not an analytics measurement. But ultimately, I have to learn with the trauma. Live with the trauma. So when you think you've forgiven yourself, you've actually gone from a place of awareness to complacency. So you haven't fully forgiven yourself. And I know you haven't, because I heard exactly what you said, and I feel behind the words. I know what's going on behind the words without telling you I know what's going on for you, because that sounds arrogant, but you haven't fully forgiven yourself. The second question I had for you, and just clarify something for me, if you don't mind. Did you say keeping your wife happy? Is that what you said? Or did you say wife happy?
Yeah.
Why have you taken on Mission Impossible to make your wife happy?
Because I feel that she's. I will want to earn my. Let's say, not earn, but at a point, I was always the leader when it came to income, and lately she's been footing the bills for everything, and I feel like I'm just like making ends meet for both of us and not supplying the proper funds to the family.
Okay, so it's kind of harder to hear you right now. So however distance you've gone from the microphone, that's another thing you need to reconcile. You need to reconcile whatever that positioning is. So we have this old thing in society where the men have to go out and they have to hunt and get the meat and they bring it back, and all this old stuff. When I transitioned, and I'm going back to a question I think it was Jim asked earlier on, what a lot of people don't know about me, not because I'm kind of embarrassed still about it, I suppose, to some extent, is that people think, oh my God, you had enough money to go and create the freedom to go and do what you wanted. That's actually horseshit. I remember sitting in my parents' kitchen in Ireland, and we were down to $200 in the bank, cash. And we probably had about $400,000 or $500,000 in debt because the real estate market went off the edge of a cliff. And finally, I turned to my wife and said, fuck it, I'm doing this coaching thing, because the pain of not doing it finally caught up. And I went out into the world and basically, did this. My wife went to work doing work she didn't really maybe want to do, but she did that for 2 years. I didn't have any guilt because I didn't have time for guilt. Because guilt just suppresses the shit out of who you are. It doesn't allow you to show up. It doesn't allow you to connect as a father. It doesn't allow you to connect as a husband. So I refused to feel the guilt that why wouldn't my wife go out and support me? I've been supporting her for the previous 5 years. I may support her for the next 40. Why wouldn't she go out and make money and keep the two of us afloat? And why couldn't, you have a choice here. One is I'd love to know where the guilt comes from, which we're not going to get to today. But, because the guilt is old. It's not new guilt. It's old guilt. It's something that is very deep within us and is just re-emerging through current circumstances. But ultimately, why wouldn't you? So I think you need to have a conversation with your wife, and you need to give yourself freedom to allow your wife to support you without continuing to beating the shit out of yourself. And the final thing I want to say is you're not that positive. Okay. You said I'm a very positive guy. You're not. That's called faking it. Because ultimately, when you're walking around pretending everything is awesome, but ultimately you're dying underneath, or you're killing a part of yourself, or you're feeling guilt, or you're feeling shame, that's not positivity. That's pretending to be positive, and it's not honoring the truth. So I'm not trying to be an asshole. I'm just trying to point out what I'm seeing or what I'm feeling. So you have an opportunity to really address some of these things, and I don't know anybody better in the world to support you with those conversations other than Ben and everybody else on the call. But please keep leaning into that and stop trying to be positive and stop trying to make your wife happy, because that's mission impossible. You'll never make her happy unless she wants to be. I used to think I'm here to make my wife happy. Happy wife, happy life. The worst statement that has ever been created, ever been produced, ever been written when it comes to relationships. And I'm sorry if that offends. I know we have one lady on the phone or on the call. It's not meant to offend people. When you really think about what that says, if I make my wife happy, I'm going to be happy.
Possible.
It has never worked in the history of mankind, because I have to sacrifice who I am to do that. And I'll never do it no matter what. It's about being personally happy in my own skin. And hopefully my wife will be happy. And I'm there to support her 100%. But I can't drag her up the mountain. I can't make her happy by just a bunch of flowers every week. So you have to let go of trying to make your wife happy and beating the crap out of yourself for letting your family down and continue to be a failure, if that's the term that you have in your head, because it feels like it is.
Thank you.
And I know that sounds harsh, guys, but I promise you it comes from a place of love.
So Mikkel, I've had the same situations. It feels like you're thanking him for kicking your ass, but it's a good thing. Don't worry about it. Jim, you had a question.
He's back.
Yeah, mine's not nearly as deep as that. Mikhail, thanks for that.
Oh, that's
that's
usually
really
when
good.
someone says that, that's like a target. Just be careful.
All right. Well, I resonate a lot with Mikhail. I hope a lot of people do, sort of. But the question I had before all that was not so much about the past and how we look into that, but more so things we're doing today in the present in looking into the future. So when you're coaching people and they are actively engaged in your process and wanting to look into the past to affect the present, to be able to envision the future, what are some of the things you like to suggest for them to sort of do once you're done with them coaching? Because you're not there 24 hours a day with them. Like examples I just wrote down, like, is it counseling? Is it reading? Is it meditating? Is it whatever, what are the things you like to see that you think are more helpful for someone to look inward during this whole process that when you work with someone?
Yeah, I want to be clear on one thing. I mean, it's just one part of my work is around the past, but it definitely is a foundational starting point in many cases. But a lot of my work is actually focused on the present. So let me just think about that for a second. I like to think that after somebody works and does the work with me, that their life is more aligned. So they are in a much better place. They're better equipped with the right questions rather than the answers. So if somebody comes to me and they've got 5 questions, 5 very pertinent, very important questions that they have about their life. Where am I going to be? How am I going to survive? Where do I need to live? Whatever those questions are. Often we're asking the wrong questions. So like the money thing, like the joint bank account or whatever, is the wrong question. Like what do you do with your bank accounts? is actually the question really is, where does independence or lack of independence show up in your life? And that'll drive a lot of the behavior. So for me, it's about making sure they're leaving with a lot of clarity, leaving with better alignment in their life, but also leaving more equipped to answer some of the questions, better questions in their lives. Beyond that, in terms of other support, I believe that everybody should get therapy. I think everybody on earth should get therapy. And anybody who doesn't is with respect, there's a selfishness there, because we're either not getting therapy because we're afraid, we're not getting therapy because we don't need it, or we're not getting therapy because we've met 3 therapists and we don't like any of them. And the reality is, whether you like it or not, you're taking your stuff from your past, you're packaging it in a beautiful, beautiful red box, beautiful pink box with a bow, and you're passing it on to the next generation. A bad therapist is better than no therapist at all. So I do believe everyone should get therapy at least once, go for 4 sessions, go for 6 sessions in their life. Other than that, I'm not a big fan of reading. I don't read books because not that I don't believe in that. I just don't read books because I'm massively dyslexic. I don't listen to lots of audios. I don't take in copious amounts of information. And ironically, when you think about information, the consumption of information, a lot of it is driven, ironically, by scarcity. It's actually driven by scarcity. What if I don't read the latest, greatest book? What if I miss out? What if there's a secret in that other book, that best-selling New York Times bestseller, that I miss out? So a lot of scarcity, or a lot of information, is actually driven by scarcity, the very thing that we want to not eradicate, but we want to address. And also the other thing about information is that when we're absorbing copious amounts of information, what ends up happening is we're drowning our own intuition. We're drowning our own wisdom. Okay, because we're too busy believing that everyone else in the world has the answer and we don't. Now, I think we need people, I genuinely believe this, not just as a self-serving comment. We all need people to draw out of us what we cannot see or are unwilling to see in ourselves. I believe we do. But I think we're getting to a point where we're consuming so much information, and we're still in this information age. What a fucking waste. We need to move to a place of consuming information, much smaller pockets of information, and allowing it to have the time to distill and to manipulate it and to land from knowledge, or sorry, not from knowledge, but from information to knowledge, to wisdom, to awareness. But we don't have the time to let that transcend into that part of our bodies because we're too busy reading the next book and the next book and the 50 other podcasts. And we're scared that if we don't learn it all, we're not going to be good enough. And I'm not trying to impress you, but more impress upon the point is, like, I don't have a letter after my name. I failed pretty much every high school exam. And yet we have psychologists, psychiatrists coming to the work. I'm working in sports psychology roles. I'm not saying that because I do that, everyone needs to follow, but information is not the answer. But I love to create an environment where people's wisdom starts to emerge, because the wisdom we have, and one example of that is One Last Talk, and I know you lifted up the book, is the amount of people I've put on a stage to deliver their one last talks going, I don't have a story. And suddenly they get off the stage and somebody hugs them and says, thank you for sharing that and giving me permission to realize that actually I'm not alone. And then they just go, oh my God, I do have a story. And they begin to believe for the first time their story matters. Everyone has enormous, obscene, obnoxious wisdom inside of them. So don't overconsume information, because all you do is suppress that.
It's big.
I mean, and I don't meditate either. Most people assume I meditate. I'm not saying meditation is not good, but use it as a tool to enhance your journey. Do not use meditation, yoga, or anything else to suppress emotion. Some of the angriest people on earth are yoga teachers. Think about that. Some of the angriest people on earth are yoga teachers. And I know it's kind of funny and flippant and some people don't like it, but if you really connect with what I just said, it's absolutely true, because they're not using yoga to enhance their journey. They're using yoga to manage and suppress emotion. That's why anger management doesn't work. Address the anger, bring the anger to the surface, talk about it, bring it into the conversations. Don't hide it as some negative part of who we are, because we're all angry at some level. The Dalai Lama himself gets pissed off. He just doesn't Facebook about it or tweet about it.
So Philip, we have another question. It's a very small question from Dwight. It's probably just a quick little answer for you. So why don't you ask your question there, Dwight?
David, are you okay there?
David.
Dwight, we're going to go to you, and I want to check in with David.
Doing great.
In a minute.
Thanks.
You okay?
Oh yeah, just digesting all this info here.
Good. I just want to check in, make sure you're okay.
Yeah.
Dwight, let's go.
There we go. Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah, so I had a question here I sent it to Ben. How do you deal with asking for help? Because I find that is a hard one for me to do sometimes. And Ben can attest to this since I joined the team. It's been hard for me to sometimes even just simply ask for a simple task to be done by our admin or something like that. I find it hard to ask for help.
You find it hard to ask for help.
Mm-hmm.
So what's the specific question, if you don't mind?
How do you struggle with that, or have you struggled with that? And if so, how did you overcome it, I guess, is what I'm trying to get at.
I struggled with it in the past, and I struggle with it every single day.
Do you have any
asking
sort of like knowledge?
A lack of asking for help is a lack of value in this earth. It's actually apologizing for having, sucking the oxygen out of the room. It's actually more a self-worth issue than anything else. Is also, if you think about it, is we don't want to bother people. For example, we don't want to ask people and burden them and everything else. But actually, it's a very selfish act because you don't give people the opportunity to actually help you. And yet, correct me if I'm wrong, and Dwight, we don't know each other, but I'm imagining, because most people who struggle asking for help are the very people that would drop everything and help somebody else. Is that something you do?
I believe that's a fair assessment. What's your take, Ben?
You got the answer, man.
Yeah.
So another thing I'd love to do with you, maybe you guys can do this for your next workshop, is Dwight, what I would love to do is take a piece of paper, and I'd love to list, and let's just do it for fun really quickly. I would love you to, if this was the hierarchy of the most important people in your life. Now, you don't write it down. Let's just talk about it. Who's number one in your list? Not what you think it should be, but who's number one in your list? Who's the most important person in your life? Who comes first? And let's all do this together.
Like person for influence or person that we care about?
Look after.
I would say it's my kids, to be honest.
Okay. Like, how many kids have you got?
2, Sydney and Dominic. They're 7 and 8.
Who's next?
6 and 8.
Let's just go. Come on, short and sweet. Let's go. And it doesn't have to be 100% accurate. Let's go.
My friend Jennifer.
Okay, who's next?
Tasha. She's the caregiver for my kids. Yeah.
Yeah. Keep going. One or two more.
I highly value Ben's opinion for sure.
Let's keep going.
He's definitely there in my life. It's hard for me to think of that, to be honest.
Okay. And where are you on the list?
Probably the bottom, I guess.
Yeah. And we haven't even got to the other people. And there's every possibility. I'm exaggerating to make a point, but maybe I'm not. Maybe the goddamn goldfish goes ahead of you. The cat, the dog, the sheep in the neighbor's fucking garden that you've heard, make noise the last 2 years, but you've never actually met. Therein lies the problem. It's not about how do you ask for more help. It's not about how do you fix that. Because again, we're asking for intellectual solutions that are ultimately, the source is an emotional problem or emotional challenge or an emotional opportunity. This has nothing to do with asking for help. This is about worthiness. This is all about worthiness. And I think that is the greatest opportunity for you. And it's not the goal, but the opportunity is to actually eventually get to a point where the number one person on that list is you. And that might go against everything that you believe and feel in the world, that is the most selfish act, that's not what you should do, that your kids should always come first. I disagree wholeheartedly. Because when you become first, when you put yourself first and you look after yourself physically, mentally, emotionally, when you start doing the work that you love, when you start nurturing yourself, when you start working on scarcity, all these different things, what ends up happening is your kids get to witness their father doing this every day. So it doesn't ever have to need to be a teaching moment in the future. It's a reality every day. So it's an inspirational moment every goddamn day. And yet we think that, oh my God, no, I need to forget about the gym on Saturday morning. I know I pencil it off. I know it's my time, but Joey has soccer and Mary has fucking art class and whatever it happens to be. I get all that, but you have to carve the time out for you in all of those areas, because the better you are as a father, the better they're going to be as kids, adolescents, teenagers, older people, adults in the future. That's how it works. So to me, the opportunity for you is in time, and again, you've got the support group here to do that, is in time work on what does it take for you to start going up that list for you to be number one. And it requires you to let go of your children at an emotional level, but never give up on them. So again, these people say, oh, you're asking me to forget about my kids. You're asking to be all selfish. No, we jump to extreme versions of this so we don't have to address it.
Exactly.
What I'm simply asking you to do is not to give up on your kids. Let's say this is your kids. That's giving up. Okay. All I'm simply asking you to do is let go of them and be there for them, but you don't have to fix them. You don't have to. And by the way, the reason they come first, analyze that. Why do they come first? Not right now, but why do they come first? What you'll find is that there's some energy or some charge. And there's a reason that you feel they need to be first, because you're afraid that they need to be protected, that you need to make sure that whatever happened in the past is not going to affect them. I see this with single parents a lot. When a couple break up, they feel they have to be the mother and the father. That's not what the kids need. What the kids need is they need you, and they need you to look after yourself, and they need you to be the healthiest, best version you can be. They don't need you. You need you to be Superman, Spider-Man, Batman, of your mother and your father and your grandmother at the same time. They don't need that. They've never needed that, and they never will. I've never met an adult that once said to me, I wish my parents worked harder, maybe smarter, but never harder. So work on what's going on for you emotionally right now. And I promise you, you'll start to take the pressure off your shoulders and realize that no matter what but you don't have to be there for your kids every moment of every day. And you're not going to be able to be. Yeah. And you don't need to be, because the greatest parenting advice I have, as obnoxious as this sounds, is no matter what you do, you're going to fuck your kids up.
Yeah.
Hug them too much, they're going to need therapy. Never hug them at all, they're going to need therapy. I'm doing something every day that inadvertently, with the greatest intention in the world, that I'm doing, that I don't even know is going to be a problem for one of my kids in the future. And the other kid is going to cite it as the greatest thing that their dad ever did. I've had siblings in the room that talk about their childhood. Siblings, brothers, sisters, whatever. And one person is talking about their childhood, and the other one goes, excuse me, hang on. Are you talking about our house? Are you talking about our parents? So it proves that no matter what you do, now you never give up on your kids, but let them go and trust that they're going to be okay if their dad comes first. I can't give you better. I cannot give you better. And it's not, it doesn't even feel like advice. It just feels like just coming from my core. That is the biggest thing that I've seen, not just personally, but professionally as well.
Thank you. I appreciate that.
So Philip, we're kind of coming to an hour here. I want to respect the time here. Just hold on. These are great questions. Feeling lighter already for the call. Right on, Graham.
Can I just jump in, Ben? I want to say very quickly.
Absolutely,
I really want to say thank you to the group. And I know that I can come across, in a particular way and everything else. I don't want to be an asshole. I'm like everyone in the world. I care what people think about me. I want to be liked. But I want to really say thank you, because it's rare for me to come into a group where people are willing to ask these types of questions, that are willing to be vulnerable, like Dwight and Graham and Jim, who wouldn't start, and then suddenly started, we couldn't get him to stop. And the other gentleman, and I can't remember his name, that we couldn't hear from. And that really cool name that I can't even pronounce, that good looking at the top left.
Oh, Koken.
Yeah. So I just want to say thank you, because that is a real privilege to be able to come in to that level of vulnerability, which is not common in the world. So thank you.
Yeah, it's beautiful, guys. Philip, we're going to close out here. I'm going to ask you a question. So I'm just thinking, like, just throw it out there. Like, if these guys were in this looking at Philip and they just have the feeling to help you out or engage or anything they want, obviously I'm wide open for any of that for you. What would be the best way to engage with you? Or even, let me just change a question. How can these guys help you?
Just spread the word about the One Last Talk movement, because I think it's the thing that is healing the world more effectively than most things I've seen in the world. So if you want to share the book, we're not a big marketing agency. We don't know how to market for shit.
Philip doesn't market anything, and he grows. So
we're not good at that.
Hey, Graham, raise the book up, please, if you don't mind. And if you guys can click and find Graham on your screen, that's the book. So that'll take you through a whole process of really connecting to your story. It's pretty much why don't you just quickly describe it, Philip? It's your baby, man.
Well, basically, it's the little story that best, I think, captures this is that the guy who went to the doctor to say, the hospital to say goodbye to his father, and the doctor comes out and says it's time, and he said he's passing away now, and the doctor said no. He said probably another 2 or 3 days, but it's time for the conversation. And the young man said, what conversation? He said, the conversation you probably should have had 15 or 20 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
We all have got stuff that we're embarrassed about. We've all got a story as subtle or as significant or as profound as it is. And the problem in society, particularly amplified by social media, is that we don't think our stories are significant enough. We don't think our stories are dramatic enough when you cite them against somebody else that's publicized. And One Last Talk is an opportunity to go into yourself and therefore have an opportunity to come back out of yourself and share a part of your personal narrative with the world that perhaps the world doesn't know. And two things happen. You free yourself of the shackles of the past, and you give other people permission to do the same. You don't have to publicly do it, but the whole invitation is to read the book, to understand who you are, to look at the bright side of your life, the light and the dark, because it's all there together, and begin to accept it. So that's why we wrote the book. It's not about me. I've refused to sign a copy of that book anywhere in the world because it's not about me. And we're trying to get that out into the world. We have chapters dropping into Edmonton and Calgary and Vancouver. We're hoping to get somebody to put their hand up. So yeah, read the book, share the book. I would love you to do that. Obviously, I do workshops under philipmckernan.com, but One Last Talk is the big thing we're trying to get out into the world.
Yeah, and there's a podcast, which Philip doesn't update all the time, which I wonder why sometimes, because you got so many great stories. But podcast is there. It's the One Last Talk podcast. And no, it's not an Audible book for some of the questions out there. You planning to make it an Audible book?
Yeah, but the problem is I can't read the book to do the audio.
And you gotta have a guy with your accent.
So what we're going to do is the latest plan is someone's going to read the book, and then I'm going to come in and do a kind of synopsis at the end of the chapter, or share a story.
Oh, I love that. I love that.
But me reading the book is very challenging. But guys, honestly, I really appreciate the invitation, Ben. But you've already given me so much just by showing up and do something with this. That's the greatest honor.
100%.
I mean, I'm working with a young
100%.
man who can't afford my services, and I just offered to spend time, and he's like tearing up, and he goes, well, what can I do for you? And I said, fucking implement this.
No doubt.
Go do something with it and then pass it on to somebody in the future. That's my ask. And I said, so let's get over the guilt of you not being able to pay for it, all the judgment. Let's do the work, make some changes, go and put this stuff into implementation. If something aligns to you, it doesn't align to you, that's fine. And then pass it forward someday. Give it to somebody. That's the greatest gift you can give to me.
It's awesome. Just so you know, Deb, my assistant, has put in the links. If you want, when I shut the call down, the links are gone. So either way, you can send me a message. We can send links and everything. Hold on, I got one last question here. Maybe I think we're gonna close her out though. How can we get to One Last Talk session in my city? I think one happened in Toronto earlier. So that's Ottawa. So Jim's from Ottawa.
We don't have somebody delivering one in Ottawa. We're looking for people to volunteer. We have training and everything else in time. We're still in the infancies of some of this. We're making some great mistakes. We're making some brilliant headway, but we want ultimately people. And by the way, just on a side note, what a great way to build a community. We don't build it for real estate clients. We don't build it to get chiropractic clients. We don't build it to get whatever, like banking clients.
Totally cool.
But if you want to bring something to your city and do it once a year, as a way of bringing your community together, and you happen to be the face of it, but you've got a separate business, there's fucking no greater way to bring a community together through the lens of something vulnerable and real. So that may be one option. And can I squeeze in one last question? I'm happy to take another question, Ben, if you want to.
Yeah, I'm respectful for your time. I'm open. If people can leave it if they want. I don't ever have a set time for this, to be honest. I just respectful for you, Philip. Eric did ask. I would like to hear. I actually had a gut feeling about Eric. I wanted to see when he put up his hand there. He has a question. Let's see what it is. Eric, you're up.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
There
All right. Hey, Phil, how's it going?
Good, thank you.
Got a quick question for you. I know you've obviously coached many people over the years, and obviously some high performers. So what I mean by high performers are people that are CEOs, people that maybe go from, I don't know, let's say, start off with 100,000 to over $1 million, 50 million, 100 million, let's just say, okay? So people who are super high performers, when you first coach them, I'm guessing now, okay, you probably have seen the whole gamut from someone who is who's got potential, and then to actually realize, holy camoli, I can actually achieve this. And of course, in real estate or business, we always talk about 10X or whatever it is these days. Are there any characteristics that you've seen in some of these high performers that you go, holy camoli, these guys have something a little bit different, where you go, yep, you know, you've got some potential here, but obviously when it comes to potential, not everyone is willing to execute and do something about it. But the ones who do, you know, like I don't know, like I'm not sure what kind of, like, what am I trying to ask you?
Well, let me jump in and
Yeah,
let me have a stab at this. I think I know
Sure.
what the question is.
Yeah.
If you want to refine the question, please feel free to do so in a moment. So what I find is, and I want to quantify something very, very, very important, is we need to define what success is for us as individuals. And we need to stop defining success, whether it's based on what Fortune magazine say or what Entrepreneur magazine says, et cetera, et cetera. So if we just purely look at numbers, we look at income and status and everything else. Yes, there are characteristics. Some of the most insecure people on earth are the people who make the most money, and their insecurities and all the fears of the past drive them. They are petrified of not having an identity. So I worked with a CEO of a massive business, a $5 billion business, and he'd just been offered the CEO role in another organization, and he'd been let go of the current organization, which is a household brand all of us would know. And he said, "What do you think?" And I said, "I think you're jumping very fast." And he goes, No, I'm not. It's a natural transition." I said, "Bullshit." And I said, "I'll prove it to you. Let's just name the town you live in. Let's just say you leave this job and you give yourself 6 or 8 weeks or 6 months and you don't take a new role. If you're walking down the street and you bump into your neighbor, Peggy, who's walking the dog, and Peggy says, "How's it going, John?" And he goes, "Great. How's things at, let's call it Coca-Cola, right? How's things at Coca-Cola?" "Oh, I've left." "What are you doing now?" "Nothing." I said, "How does that feel?" And he goes, "Oh my good God." He says, "You just touched on something powerful." He said he was so afraid not to have that CEO identity. Now, so that's societal success. Now, if you want to talk about what I believe is real success, is great monetary income, great success in that area, but it doesn't come at the cost of our own mental health. It doesn't come at the cost of our peace of mind, that we truly have connection, we have family, with everything else. The one characteristics I see with those people is that they are deeply coachable. Number one, they're willing to go into their personal lives, into their past, into their present, into their sex lives, their intimacy, all of these things on the peripheral that appear on the surface often that they've no relevance. So everything off the ice and how it affects them on the ice. And when I work with athletes, someone will say, "Well, hang on, how has this piece got anything to do with my speed on the water or on the track?" And my answer is, I have no fucking idea, but let's figure it out. What if we can just squeeze 1%? That 1%, that 0.5% will make a difference in terms of 40% in terms of revenue or whatever it happens to be. So they're willing to go to the places that they don't even see intellectually that have any meaning. And if I could leave you with this, and this is not me speaking for Ben, but if I could encourage you, and I know Ben it will create a safe place for this, but I would encourage you, the more you share in these groups, within reason, obviously, you know, you've your timelines and Ben has to run the whole thing and everything else, but the more you can bring the parts of you that you don't want to talk about to the table, the more you'll feel supported, less judged in the world. But the people who jump from that, not just revenue success, but personal success, they're willing to do the deeper interior work. And most people don't do that. And that's why you see so many people becoming billionaires and they're not happy. I'm working with a client right now who flies around his private jet, and he said to me, "I'm fucking miserable." And now we're dealing with a lot of the personal stuff.
It's really, really cool what you've touched on, only because honestly, I feel like I'm on the verge of exploding. Like, it's like, they're just everything that I'm doing with business and so forth. And it's so much fun right now. And yeah, no, thank you very much for sharing that. That's so cool.
And by the way, the time to invest in yourself on a personal level is when things are exploding.
Yeah.
Not just when things are going, you know, challenging and everything else. I get that. But when people start to really rocket and they start to take off and they get busy, it's often a time where they go, you know, I'll come back to the personal stuff in the future. Let me just nail the next 2 years, and then I'll have time to go and do all the fluffy stuff and whatever other judgmental little tonalities they use to justify not doing it right now. The time to work in your relationship is when it's at its best. The time to work in the relationship with yourself is when you feel that you've never been better. The time to invest in your business is when things are going good and you go, I don't fucking need a coach. I've got my shit together. And think about what Graham offered us earlier on. Things are going really well, and they're always going well. They're always going well in life until they're not. Health is brilliant until it's not. Our relationships are fantastic until they're not. And there's always going to be something around the corner. So always be aware, without undermining yourself, that, you know, the good today is great, but make sure that you're investing in yourself to make sure that you're looking in the peripheral for the things that you cannot see coming in the future. All right. So guys and girls, I have to go right now because I'm a bit time squeezed, but I really appreciate your time and thanks for having me on, Ben.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Philip. I'll let you go there. Thank you so much, Philip.
Thanks, guys. Bye-bye.